Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. I have the SCT Sampler Kit unboxing for you again this month, and if you're new here, whenever I do an unboxing, I always do a project, and I have a few stamping techniques, including a watercoloring stamping technique to share with you in that project, so be sure to stick around for that. All right, here is our little kit. I love getting these little kits in the mail. They are samplings of current supplies on the market, and these little packages are packed with goodness without breaking the bank. So as I dive into this package, you can see that our theme word for the month is thank you. And for all of 2022, SCT has been including a word die and shadow to match the theme word. So we've got our thank you die and shadow there. And I am collecting lots of these word dies and enjoying them a whole lot. Our reusable item this month is this sweet little squirrel stamp set, big fall theme stamp set, and I'm going to put that to use on the project. So like I said, I've got some techniques with that. And then on the back of our card lists all the different manufacturers that we have. Usually there's two main manufacturers, and that is true this time around. We have some Vicki Boutin supplies from American Crafts on the right, and we have some crepe paper supplies on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the crepe paper stash here. We've got some enamel dots, a partial package of these die cut ephemera pieces. Definitely that collection of supplies is definitely fall themed, but the Vicki Boutin stuff is more open-ended and more usable, so I like getting a mix of both of these things. Let's take a look at these papers, and isn't that little pumpkin mixed in with those leaves very sweet? I like these prints, and you'll see here in a minute that they've got some teal added into the collection. Here it is with those leaves, and I've noticed that in a few other collections, and there you can see that teal again. But adding this teal into these fall colors is really pretty, I think. So I liked that set of supplies. Even though I don't do a lot of seasonal specific scrapbooking, I will put those things to use for sure. And here we go with the Vicki Boutin supplies. We have one little paperclip layered element. We have some phrase puffy stickers. We have a partial pack of ephemera die cuts. Pardon my phone there. And these ephemera die cuts, like I said, are very open-ended and very usable for lots of different projects, and very colorful because that is definitely Vicki Boutin style. This was a little bit of a surprise. We have one of the greeting card elements from that collection. We don't usually get a whole greeting card and envelope in our kits, so that was a neat little tidbit. Here is a cut apart from one of the pattern papers that has some tags on either side. And then the rest of the pattern papers, again, these are samples from full 12 by 12 sheets that get cut down to 6 by 6 size. So any of these supplies that you see in these kits will vary slightly from kit to kit as they pull apart packages and pieces and give you samples from everything. This is Vicki Boutin's latest collection, which I want to say Color Study, but that's not it. I'll pop it up on the screen, the name of this collection, and normally I will buy all of Vicki Boutin stuff, but because I do have a backlog of supplies from her, I have decided not to buy this particular collection, so it's fun to get to play with these pieces anyway. All right, let's move on to the project. Here is that quick peek, and like I said, I do have some techniques for you on this one. I have these photos of sunflowers growing in my garden that the squirrels have nicked. And they don't look like much in the photos because the sunflowers are gone. Both of those photos had missing sunflowers. So I'm going to tell this story today using this cute little stamp and these photos. When I create my projects, I really do try to focus on the supplies in the kit. So I have my kit there. I do need an extra sheet of cardstock since I'm making a scrapbook layout and some alphabets. And then from this Lawn Fawn set, I'm pulling out a frame die set, and that will just give me some ways to frame my photos. And you could come up with lots of other ways to do that if you don't have a frame set at home. The next thing I do when I'm working on a project is to pull out the pieces from the kit that I think could work with my project. And I almost always end up pulling out more pieces than I actually use. But this is the first step of narrowing everything down. I did line up that frame to make sure that it was going to work okay on a larger print of pattern paper because I wanted to make sure I could still see that foliage piece there. So with that satisfied, I've got a bunch of bits and pieces up there at the top of the screen. I do make sure that the frame is going to fit around my photos, and my photos are 3 by 4 inches so that they'll fit on my 8.5 by 11 project. All right, off screen, I did go ahead and die cut 2 frames, and from the guts of these frames, I'm going to die cut that thank you word. And you'll see how I put that to use to make the squirrels mock me in this layout. So that's my little sense of humor coming through. I did die cut both of these because I'm going to do an inlaid die cut technique, which you can see right here. I pop out the purple die cut and I lay in the lighter colored die cut, and I do pop back in all of those little pieces in between the loops of the letters so that I can get a solid image out of that, and I do tape them in place so that I don't lose track of them. With that done, we're going to go ahead and start off with our first stamping technique, which is going to be a watercolor stamping technique. Now I'm going to use markers to ink up my stamps, but you can go ahead and use whatever inks you have. Be sure to prep your brand new stamps first so that they will hold as much ink as possible. And you can do this technique with solid stamps or outline stamps, and today I've got both so you can see the way it looks on both. I do test my colors to make sure I've got the colors that I want, and then I'm just going to use the side of my marker nib to ink up this stamp entirely. And with markers, you can add bits of different colors here and there, which you'll see me do in just a second when I switch colors. And there comes the extra color. I can just accent certain areas of the stamp when I'm using markers. That is harder to do, but possible with ink sets. And then I breathe on the stamp just a little bit to kind of help reactivate the ink so that it can stick to my paper. And you will see that it is splotchy. That's okay. The next step is going to help with that. Now, I should say at this point that I am using watercolor paper. This technique won't work on regular cardstock. So I have got a water brush here, and I actually don't like water brushes, but I was trying really hard to use it, and you'll see me switch that out later. But the point of this part is to wet the area where that stamp is, and you're just going to trace over it with a wet paintbrush. And I find that you don't want it to be dripping wet, which is why I don't like these aqua brushes, but you do want it to be fairly damp so that it can smooth out and spread that ink around. And wherever you have those markers of different colors, you can use the water to blend those into an even flow so it doesn't look splotchy. And there I was doing the top of the little acorn, and I did that entirely in that second color. If you need more color, you can scribble it onto your stamp block and just pick that up with your wet paintbrush and add in to areas that maybe needed a little more color. So here I am doing 2 more squirrels, and you can see on the left I've got that one squirrel completely watercolored and I've dried it, and these 2 are just stamped, so you can see the difference that makes. The next part of this is to do the outline, and it's very similar. I'm going to use a gray marker to ink this up, but this could have totally been done with a gray ink pad instead. But I've got my markers out, so I'm using those. Now, here's where the aqua brush really doesn't work because it has too much water for the detail of this stamp. So I just barely want to touch my damp brush to that gray line to reactivate the ink so that I can pull that ink into the image without flooding the image with deep gray. And you can see how I get the shadows around the squirrel's face and in the tail and belly without it, again, without it flooding with totally too dark of a gray color. So that is why a detailed paintbrush is going to be more helpful than an aqua brush. All right, next step is to fussy cut. And if you hate fussy cutting, I totally understand. I used to hate it too. 2 of my biggest tips were to cut off roughly any excess paper before you even get started, and then to hold your scissors steady in one hand while you rotate the paper with your other hand. And with those 2 tips, I found that I could actually do a decent job at fussy cutting. So I got all my squirrels fussy cut out. I did print just the flower from my photos in a couple of different sizes on another sheet of photo paper. And then I'm going to fussy cut around these squirrels' hands because in the stamp they're holding acorns, but I'm going to let them hold these sunflower images from my photos because this story is about these cheeky squirrels who stole my sunflowers. So that is how I finished off my little squirrel embellishments. I'm going to go ahead and start laying out the body of this project. I do have my 2 photos. I have that giant thank you that I cut out, and I'm going to turn that into a speech bubble. And these squirrels, like I said earlier, are going to be chatting at me about how much they enjoy my sunflowers. So I just punched out a couple of different sizes of little circles, and by flowing those from the word, it turns it into a speech bubble. No big deal. I was going to finish off the other speech bubbles, but I realized I needed to make sure that I've got room for my title first. So I pulled out just another sheet of pattern paper to be a banner piece that will be the shelf for my title. And I figured that will fit right there. And I thought I was going to do my subtitle next, but I decided I wanted to finish off the squirrels first. So I pull out another stamp, or I pull the stamp back out and some more punches because I want to get more words onto this for those squirrels to chatter at me. So I've got a circle punch up there and with a bigger circle punch, and then the littler circle punches to turn that one into a speech bubble as well. And this is going to lead us into the next stamping technique, which is to cut apart your stamps. This is really easy to do, and I know it freaks some people out, but you really can just puzzle piece them back together if you want them whole again. But this gives you a lot more flexibility with your stamps, and especially with word stamps, because I just wanted the word grateful. I didn't need all the other words on there. You could also cover unwanted areas with tape before inking. Just be sure to remove that tape before you stamp. If you really can't cut your stamps apart, that tape technique helps. All right, I've got my word grateful on there, but it doesn't fit on the entirety of the circle. So as I put it on my project, I'm trying to decide if I'm okay with that. It is still readable, but you know, I really do like the extra edges to fill out the letters. Now, why didn't I stamp this word on top of that circle after I glued it down to my project? That's because the edges of paper on top of paper create a gap when you're stamping, and it will look incomplete. So if you stamp it first and then overlay another stamped piece on top, you'll get a much smoother, more complete look to stamp. So this is another technique. This isn't, a super good example, but there are times when this technique does come in handy. For example, in like a big floral bouquet, you could highlight just a couple of flowers in that bouquet with this technique. At any rate, that wraps up the stamping techniques that I had. So the rest of this is just about getting this layout put together. Up in my title area, I did realize that I wanted a little more oomph up there. So I added a few more strips of pattern paper from the leftovers from other die cutting, and I will get that glued down. I get my word hey from that Vicki Boutin set popped on there, and I definitely yelled that at the squirrels, like, hey, leave my sunflowers alone, and the rest of my garden while we're at it. So I did finish off my title that says, you little rascals. So that is the title done. I did realize I had one more squirrel that I needed to talk to me, and that squirrel is just going to use the word thanks from that stamp set. Again, I cut apart my stamp to use it for this word. And I did punch that, or I did stamp that on a different punched shape for that one. And then a final step that I wanted for this layout was little arrows and notes that point to the sections of the photos that point out where the flowers were stolen. And these little notes are going to say nicked, because they nicked my sunflowers. They stole them from me. So I got the words nicked on there with that same alphabet sticker set from Simple Stories. I put it on just another piece of this pattern paper that I had used to punch out the other squirrel words. And then with that same shade of that pattern paper, I am going to just hand draw some arrows. Arrows are easy to hand draw. Don't let it intimidate you. And then I realized I wanted my arrow to be a little pointier, so I just trimmed it off a little bit more, got it pointier, and then I'm highlighting that arrow with a bit more pin work to make it a little more stand out. So I've got 2 sets of those going on here to point to the significant areas in each photo. where they stole my sunflowers, and it does say nicked, and I popped that up on a little bit of foam adhesive to make it stand out just a little bit more. I'm going to finish off this layout with journaling around the edge, and I didn't go all the way around, so I finished off that edge with a little bit of a doodle border, and I'm done. So as we take a look at these still photos, I will say thank you so much for watching. I do hope you got something helpful out of this video or amusing with my relationship with the squirrels. And if you did, I would appreciate a thumbs up because that does help my channel. And I will be back next week with more crafty goodness for you. So if you're new here, I do hope you'll subscribe and join me then. And for all my longtime viewers, thank you so much for continuing to stick around. I do appreciate you being here. Until next time, have an artful day.